welcome back to the Middle of Culture. I am one of your co-hosts, Peter.
And I'm your other co-host, Eden.
Eden, how the heck have you been?
I have been doing pretty great. Just trying to keep myself busy, trying not to lose my mind with work and all that sort of stuff. And yeah. How about you?
About the same. You know, we're getting back into the school swing of things. Gareth has started his sophomore year of high school, and so we've got school going on and high school swim, which, you know, high school swim is interesting just because there are such limited resources here in Pocatello for kids to swim that all three high schools are basically fighting for the same location, which means they are vying for times, whether it's either early in the morning or late at night or whatever. So it makes it a little interesting trying to juggle all that. But yeah, other than
That sounds hard.
it is, and it's one of those things that it would be really nice if they would build like an actual aquatic complex here in Pocatello. It would get used like crazy, or even if they just built Ross Park, which is the outdoor pool that's open during the summer, if they would do something like that, so that at least over the lane pool portion of it, they could put like a bubble or something. But I don't know. It's a little sad, but you know, it is what it is. So
True enough.
well, what have you been checking out? I know, you know, you and I this is a little inside baseball for listeners. At the last minute, we changed plans of what we were going to do just because of some things in life that kind of got in the way, not in a bad way, but in a good way, just a little change of plans. So we will have a topic for the week. Might be a little shorter, but it seems like every time we say that's going to be the case, it ends up not being the case. But what have you been into lately? And again, I think we'll maybe dive into this stuff a little more than usual. And yeah,
I'm sorry. I just had a big sneeze.
that's quite all right.
It's my fault that we had to pivot at the last second, dear listeners, because I picked a movie that I did not realize was 2 hours and 47 minutes long. Will we get to that 2 hour and 47-minute movie? Yes, we will. Hopefully next episodio. I'm very excited about it. However, the fact remains, neither of us were like in a position this week to be like, you know what, I should watch how many minutes is that? 167 minutes or some crap like that. It's real long. But we'll hopefully get to it. Anyway, I have been busy playing a fair amount of video games. It had been a while since I dug into an RPG. Been a few weeks.
Okay.
So I was like, I'm going to give Warhammer 40K Rogue Trader a try again.
Okay.
Because I played a few hours. You know, when I first finished Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous a few months ago, I was like, oh, let's see what else Owlcat has done. And so I tried Warhammer 40K Rogue Trader, and I was like, it seems interesting, but I did just finish a very big RPG, and the combat in this game is like, what if XCOM, but a little ass?
Okay.
And so, like, full disclosure, by the time I got to the end of Wrath of the Righteous, I had God mode on, so nothing could hurt my party, and I had turned combat speed all the way up, so I was not actually doing any of these fights. But when it's explicitly a turn-based game, you have to do the fights now.
Tis true.
So I was at that point, I was like, I don't know that I'm ready for that. But it had been a few weeks since I'd played anything. I wanted to get back and like dig into an RPG, which was maybe foolhardy because I didn't get very far into it until another thing came along and stole my attention, which I'll talk about here in a minute. But it's pretty good.
Okay.
I mean, again, the combat is XCOM, but ass, and 40K is a world that I mostly find cringe rather than interesting. Are you you a Warhammer person? You ever play the Warhammer games or read any of the Warhammer books, Peter?
Nope. I have a number of the Warhammer books that I picked up at some point from like...
In a humble bundle.
Exactly, from a humble bundle. I have a number of Warhammer games that I've picked up over the years. Have I ever actually played any of them? No, I have not. So I am familiar with Warhammer, but have never, with Warhammer 40K, but have never actually really, I've never really dived into anything associated with it.
Okay. I have played some Warhammer games, not a ton. The thing about Warhammer is there's a gajillion games because
the crap ton of them.
They'll just give that license. They'll just give that license to anyone. Which, that's more interesting to me than it's so hard to get a license for this. It's so like, ooh, there's so few games in this like big, a property. Because the fact of the matter is, if 1 billion people are making games, you're going to get a lot of garbage, but you're also going to get some good stuff. But if nobody's making games in your cool world, then what little you get, we just all have to subsist on. Again, tied to a thing that I might be talking about here in a minute.
I wondered. I was going to make a comment about a certain property, but didn't want to, just in case you're going to end up going where I think you might be going. So we'll save that until you're done with this. Yes.
An educated guess as to what might have stolen my attention away from Warhammer 40K Rogue Trader. But yeah, it's fun. You play as a rogue trader, which is in the world of 40K. The rogue traders are people who've been given the warrant of trade by the God Emperor. Again, I say all this and it just makes me cringe inside. I just think it's a goofy world. Basically, they're supposed to go out on the frontier and like be the vanguard of civilization, essentially. Like, okay, whatever. But functionally what that means is, hey, it's an RPG. I am a leader of a small society, and I need to make sure that this city, aka my ship, is working right. And I have a series of companions that fill different roles. It's just one of those. It's just one of those. It's just one of those. And I'm having a pretty good time with it. And I'll get back to it when I'm done with some of the other stuff that has caught my attention. But I think it's pretty cool. And it's doing some interesting stuff. I don't know. The thing about every Warhammer game that I've played is it's always like, oh, we've got to fight against chaos, which is this weird like metaphysical thing that comes from the warp, blah, 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 blah. Where's the goddamn orcs, guys? I know there are orcs in this universe. Can I fight an orc? Why do I got to keep fighting against chaos? This is boring. Let me fight an orc. Anyway. So I was playing that for a while. And then another game came out. And that's Genshin Impact Patch 5.0. I can say words. This was a swerve, listeners. There's another swerve. I'm joking here. Genshin Impact 5.0 did come out. I'm having fun with it. A new kingdom unlocked in Genshin, which is called Natlan, which is based on Mesoamerica. So far I'm not hideously offended by it. I'm just mostly like, okay, weird choices made. But it is what it is. There's some fun new traversal things. There's some fun new, like, you have to turn yourself into an animal to do certain things, which is kind of fun. That's a new thing for the game. And the new Archon, the new like leader of this kingdom, she seems cool as hell. So I got sucked back into Genshin for a bit, and I was like, okay, Genshin's pretty fun. I'm having fun with this again. We'll see if it can keep my attention for a little bit.
All right.
But this is all just me equivocating, dear listeners. We all know what the big releases that came out this week. Well, maybe not all of us. You maybe know, if you follow video games, what the big releases that came out this week. And as I jokingly said to Peter before we started the podcast, some people are suckers and pay $105 so that they can play it 3 days early.
Okay.
And that, dear listeners, is Star Wars Outlaws.
I'm glad to know that I had totally predicted and guessed correctly.
You had, like, of course I'm playing Star Wars Outlaws. Give me a break. And of course I bought the gold edition so that I can get the DLCs when they come out and not have to pay for them separately. And I got to access it 3 days early that way. So I got to start playing on Tuesday the 27th, while all of you plebes who wanted to play normal price of $70, which is apparently normal price for a video game now, had to wait till Friday.
Was it worth it?
So have you touched it at all?
No. I am Star Wars Outlaws curious, but it's an Ubisoft game, correct?
It is an Ubisoft massive game.
Okay, so after feeling a little burned by either pre-ordering or jumping in right at the beginning on a few Ubisoft games in the last little bit. I have decided I'm going to let the dust settle for Star Wars Outlaws, and then I'll pick it up at some point. But I fully intend to get it, but I would be surprised if it is, at least if it is any less than 6 months before I pick it up. I will be surprised, honestly.
That's fair. Here's the thing. As a friend of mine said in a Discord, what's the verdict on Outlaws? Ubisoft open world map slop complimentary, or Ubisoft open world map slop derogatory? And my answer to that is Ubisoft open world map slop mostly complimentary.
Okay.
I'm having a pretty good time with it. And I think we've discussed like the Assassin's Creed games. I am a person who thinks that they kind of suck and then realizes I spent 100 hours playing them. So like, I'm not immune apparently to the charms of clearing a map, which this is a thing I've known about myself. I like when there are things on a map. I like when I go to it and I do a thing and then it's not on the map anymore. Yeehaw, yay, the map is clean.
I'm with you there.
It's one of those, but it's also set in the world of Star Wars, which I have very complicated feelings about at this point in my life.
Yep.
For a lot of years, Star Wars was like my number one primary fandom. We grew up with, the toys in our house that we had like inherited from someone. Our cousin sold them in a yard sale, so our grandma bought them and kept them in her basement until I took them. Like, it was that sort of situation. They were like, hand me downs.
Yep.
But like, grew up watching them taped off TV. I remember going to see the Phantom Menace with you, like opening day in 1999. So like, we were both reading all of those books that were coming out, the Thrawn trilogy and the terrible Kevin J. Anderson books with his self-insert characters, and the Crystal Star, which was so terrible. I still remember the name of it and thinking, this is one of the worst books I've ever read, but I still read it. I remember going to see, R.A. Salvatore speak at the library so I could get my copy of Vector Prime signed. Like, I was in Star Wars. And then the prequels came out and I was sort of out of Star Wars for a while. And then I grew up and I realized, the prequels are dope. And I was back in Star Wars, baby. And then the sequels come out. Here's the thing. Attack of the Clones is bad, but Revenge of the Sith fucking slaps. Revenge of the Sith is a good movie. But then, Disney buys it. And they're like, we're going to turn this into a multimedia franchise. And I'm like, I don't know that that's necessary, but okay. And a lot of the stuff in the Disney output has been mid to bad. Like the first season of Mandalorian is pretty okay. The second season of Mandalorian, I didn't finish because I got bored. And I've never seen Boba Fett or season 3 because I got bored. Andor, the highest of highs, the best thing Star Wars has ever done. Ahsoka, what are we doing here, guys? How did you blow it this bad? You used to write these exact characters better in animation, so why did you make it live action, and why did you write them terribly? And the movies, don't even get me twisted. I don't think any of the sequel trilogy movies are good.
No,
even everyone who's like, but I think The Force Awakens is sloppy reruns of a far better film. I think Last Jedi tries to recuperate something and do something interesting, but largely fails at that. I think it's the most interesting of the three by a country mile, but I think it's largely a failure because I don't think that it is setting pieces up in a way that will work for anyone else to pick up those pieces, but then he had to set the board for someone else to come in. And that person was supposed to be Colin Trevorrow, and then the Book of Henry bullshit happened, and then we didn't get Colin Trevorrow's version, which I've read the script treatments. It would have been a more interesting episode 9. But instead, we got the criminal J.J. Abrams coming back and doing the most dogshit Star Wars movie ever. Worse than Attack of the Clones. So I was like, I don't know about Star Wars, guys. But like, that Jedi Fallen Order game, that was pretty good.
Yeah, it was. It was.
That Jedi Survivor game, that was even better.
Still haven't played it. But...
And so I was like, it's really good. I highly recommend it. Maybe play it before you play Outlaws because it's shorter and you can probably get it for cheaper.
I mean, I already own it, so it's just a matter of getting around to it.
There you go. That one gives you lightsaber and gun. That's great. What if lightsaber and gun? Or what if lightsaber two-handed because twice as long? These are both important questions that Jedi Survivor answers. Star Wars Outlaws, importantly, asks a different question. What if that cute droid from the Jedi games was replaced with an axolotl dog?
Oh.
And the answer to that is, I love everything about this. Nix, your little dog friend, who's like a little axolotl lizard boy dog who sits on your back and does things for you. Incredible. All-timer character. And I really like the main character, Kay Vess. You're playing as this woman. This is not spoilers. This is all just set up for the game. You play this woman named Kay Vess, who is like a small town thief who's from Canto Bight, and she gets an opportunity for a big score. She takes it. Things go south. She has to escape, and she now has a death mark on her, and she is roaming around the galaxy in a stolen ship, trying to figure out how can I get this death mark off me, which is like a bounty hunter thing in Star Wars, for those of you who are listening who aren't Star Wars heads like us. And the thing is she is a charming main character. I like her a lot. I think the performance is really solid. I think the writing for her is really, really solid. She gives like an every person feel without feeling like it's trying too hard to be Han Solo again. Like, she is fundamentally a different character than Han Solo, even if she is in a sort of similar situation of being a like scuzzy, kind of smugly, scoundrelly person. But I think it's doing interesting things with her. And I think there's an interesting supporting cast. And then you have to play the game, and it's open world Ubisoft map slop.
Sure.
And so that is how I feel about the game. I think it's got some really interesting and compelling storytelling beats. I think there's some really interesting mechanics of like, there are 4 criminal syndicates that are all kind of working with and against and playing off of each other and taking jobs for some and taking jobs for the other. And you're trying to balance your relationship and their attitude towards you. Because like, if it gets too bad, they'll just shoot you on sight, and then you can't work for them anymore. You can't get any jobs for them anymore. But if they like you, if you start getting too close to them, then the other ones are going to like you less. So it's a real balancing act of like, okay, like, who should I am presented a choice in this mission. If I do this, the Crimson Dawn's going to be happy. If I do this, the Pikes are going to be happy. And the other one, whichever one I pick, the other one's going to be pissed off. So what are my relationships like with these groups right now? Do I want to try to max it out with Crimson Dawn so I can get the benefits of having a maxed out reputation with them? Because it's probably going to change my reputation with the Pikes from poor to bad, which is a problem, because then they're going to shoot me on sight if I enter their territory. So like, it's got some interesting mechanics there, but then like, it's a lot of stealth, and the stealth isn't great. And you spend a lot of time like trolling around on your speeder bike, and the speeder bike doesn't control great. It's kind of rough to control because it really only has one speed, and that speed is zoom. And I'm like, I would wish there was a little more variation to the speed here. But it is what it is. I'm having a good time with it though. I'm really liking it. I'm probably 25 hours in.
Okay.
And I'm having fun. I've unlocked 2 of the 4 planets you can go to. I think, at least on my galaxy map, there are 4 places I can go. I've been to 2 of them, and I think I'm having a good time.
Nice.
So if you like Star Wars and you don't mind Ubisoft open world map slop, this is more of it. And I'm having a good time with it.
Excellent. Any other games? And then maybe what I'll do is I'll talk about what game or games I've been into, and then we can kind of go to the next thing we've been checking out.
That's all there is for me. I mean, that's a lot. It was a feast of gaming.
So mine is not so much a feast of gaming. There's a small item of shame I have to share first, and that is, ever since I finished Phantom Liberty, I still have not really gone back to Cyberpunk 2077. So I still need to go back, and I still need to finish that game. I have not. But you know what I did get back into? Maybe it was the end of the week or early this week. I think it was maybe end of last week. And that is, I got back into Diablo IV. And now the first time
Okay.
I played Diablo 4, had to go through the campaign and I did it with a sorcerer. And I was using kind of lightning focused magic mostly, and I enjoyed it. I thought it was fun. I liked the sorcerer in Diablo 3 a lot. I fiddled around with a couple other things, did a few levels of barbarian and necro and druid and a rogue as well, but just really wasn't getting into them. So this time I started as a barbarian, and it still just wasn't feeling great. Like, it was feeling a little slow, and and I decided to mix it up. So I went ahead and I fired up a rogue, and I'm using a combination of puncture and God, I can't even remember. I don't have it in front of me. The names are stupid of the different abilities and stuff, but it's mainly kind of a knife focused rogue with one really, really high damage kind of single target attack for bigger things, for elites or for bosses, things like that. So I started playing as a rogue, skipped the campaign, was doing the seasonal stuff. I've dabbled in all the previous seasons, but I'd never finished the little seasonal story. This one I got in and I start playing this rogue, and all of a sudden, like I'm like level 10 and I am just annihilating. And I'm like, okay, this is kind of fun. So I go through and I finish the seasonal storyline, and then I get to level 50. Now, for those who are not familiar, Diablo 4 and all the Diablo games to some degree, there's the game itself, and then there's kind of the big meta where it's all right. Now you're farming stuff and you're trying to get different things, and you're looking at your affixes and you're swapping things out, and that part I don't find as enjoyable. But to some degree, if you want to progress in the game, at some point you do have to engage with that a little bit. So I fire up this rogue and I get up to level 50, and now all of a sudden I got to start doing Paragon stuff. And I'm looking at recommended Paragon points, where to spend. And I start going this route, and I very quickly get to a point where it's like, well, I can't unlock this next node in the Paragon board because my strength is way too low. Because, as a rogue, you're focused on dexterity, and that's mostly what's been leveling up as I've been leveling up. And so my strength, I'm sitting there at strength of like 122, and to unlock this node on the Paragon board, I need a strength of 170.
Oh,
And
geez.
I'm like, what the fuck? So I actually stopped playing it for a day or two. And then I came back and I start playing it again, and I realize, oh, idiot, gems slotted into armor upgrade your base stats. So I go and I look, and I got a piece of chest armor that's got two slots for gems in it. And I go and I look, and I'm like, oh, look, like each one of these, I think that might be amethyst or topaz, I don't remember. Anyway, one of the gems, I'm like, each one of these adds like plus 40 to my strength. So I throw two gems into this chest armor, and now boom, I got everything I need, and I can start unlocking the whole Paragon board. And so then I get to about level 51, and it's like, hey, look, maybe it was right when I hit level 50. The game now says, hey, you know what? You need to do the capstone dungeon now to unlock World Tier 3 Nightmare. And I'm like, oh, so I'm thinking about this for a couple days, because I'm like, I remember the first time I did the capstone dungeon to unlock World Tier 2. Like, it was a long time. And I did a little Google, and I'm like, how long is the capstone dungeon going to take? And, I'm reading a lot of things that are like, oh, you should plan like 45 to 60 minutes to get through the capstone dungeon. And so I'd kind of put it off for a couple days until I knew I just had some uninterrupted time at night where I could sit down and I could just dedicate at least an hour to blast it through this thing. So in the
Sure.
meantime, they had this thing this season where right now treasure goblins are all over the freaking place. And so you can get treasure like crazy. So I'm getting some treasure goblin stuff, and I get a couple unique daggers. No, sorry. Because the uniques came in World Tier 3. But so I'm like, I could get right there, and I'm like, I think I can handle this dungeon. And it says level 55, but I'm like level 50 or 51. And I'm like, let's go try it. So using this rogue build, I go through this dungeon, work my way through it. I finish the capstone dungeon, never have to revive, don't die once. And I look, and it
Nice.
took like 13 minutes.
Jeez.
Yeah. So I immediately go and I unlock World Tier 3. and I jump into World Tier 3, which is, kind of nightmare, and I go and I start playing it, and I get rocked. Like just
Yeah.
rocked because everything says level 55 plus and I'm at level 51 and I leave Kyovashad, the start, like the main one of the main hub cities, and I go out to go just do a little side quest. And I come around the corner outside the city and boom, I am dead. And I'm like, what is going on here? And so now that I think about it, this was before I'd figured out the Paragon board. So I'm frustrated. So again, take another couple day break from. Come back, and I chase down a treasure goblin. And the next thing I know, now that I'm in World Tier 3, I start getting some uniques. So I get some unique gear, and I start loading myself up with unique gear. And now I am just steamrolling everything. So I'm popping into, now I'm unlocking the little sigils that, I convert dungeons into nightmare dungeons. And then I go and I run through these nightmare dungeons that are supposed to be more difficult. Same thing. I'm blasting through these nightmare dungeons in like 10 minutes, maybe even less. The only reason a dungeon takes me any time to get to the end now is literally just the running through the dungeon and the backtracking. Because my stupid rogue is so powerful right now with a combination of the gear and then the Paragon points and all these things that I've unlocked. Like nothing stands in my way. I get to the end. Now, remind me, did you ever play Diablo 4, Eden?
I have not played Diablo 4 at all. I played a fair amount of Diablos 2 and 3, but I just kind of got number 4 came out and I was just like, yeah, I'm good actually.
Sure.
I don't need to play this.
Totally get that. So anyway, you'll get to bosses in Diablo that will have a great big health bar at the top. And I can't remember if they did this in Diablo 3 as well, where it's like, and I think it did, but it's like you knock it down a certain amount and then like it has like stages, right? And once you
like any good JRPG boss.
Sure.
Yeah.
And so like once you knock it down a certain number of, one stage, at every stage you knock it down, this thing's going to just like dump a whole bunch of health potions and crap like that. So I go into
every
these
time
things.
the twink must become the devil so that you can kill him as God intended.
Correct.
This is how JRPGs are.
So I get to these bosses at the end of dungeons or things like that that'll have anywhere between like 3 to 5 stages to them. And I launch off this rapid fire that right now, not only does it do massive damage to one enemy, it also explodes and creates an AoE when it lands. And I launch this off, and some of these things, literally that's all it takes. Like these multi-stage bosses, I launch off a single rapid fire and they die. And I am having a lot of fun. And then I had a little epiphany. Now this epiphany, look, you spend 100 and whatever so you could play a game a few days early. I spent 100 and whatever to buy Diablo 4 again, specifically on Steam, because I don't know what the problem is. I have installed it through Battle.net on some of my Windows-based handhelds, and it just wouldn't play very well. And I know there've been a few issues with some of the AMD drivers that haven't been great, and this, that, and the other. So finally, I'm just like, screw this. This thing says it's deck verified. It's one of the highest played games on Steam Deck. Clearly, it runs fine on the Steam Deck. So I bought it again through Steam, and you know what? Diablo 4 plays like a dream on the Steam Deck. Like,
does it?
It plays beautifully. Yeah, it plays so well. So I am having a blast. I mean, I've probably this weekend put another like 4.5, 5 hours in Diablo 3 on the Steam Deck, just sitting there sitting on the couch playing with the Steam Deck, and it plays great and it looks good and it's been a blast. And so I am all back in on Diablo 4 and I'm having a blast. And I'm only at level 61, but I'm stomping through things so easily that a couple times I've had the thought, should I just go and see what happens in the capstone dungeon for Nightmare to unlock Torment difficulty? And I haven't done it yet, but I'm like, I feel like the way I'm steamrolling every other dungeon I come across, I'm like, I think I could take on a level 70 dungeon, and I'm only level 61. So we'll see. But I'm having actually a ton of fun playing Diablo 4 again. We're going to see what happens. I do want to kind of, now that I feel like I've gotten the hang of the post level 50 gameplay to some degree. I kind of want to see if I can get all the way up to 100 with a character. And then maybe I'll try something else. Gareth was watching me play this, and so he started playing it on the Xbox, and he's doing a necromancer, and he's having fun with that. And I love the necromancer in Diablo 3. I thought it was one of the most fun classes. So we'll see. But I am surprisingly having a ton of fun jumping back into Diablo 4, and really just I'm having a lot of fun. It's been basically all of my gaming time, especially now that I can play it on the Steam Deck. It's like all of my gaming time. I'm either at my desktop with the 32-inch monitor, which is really nice, but the fact that I can just fire it up on this Steam Deck and just play it wherever that I have an internet connection, it's pretty good. And again, I've got some of the other Windows handhelds. I know you've got the ROG Ally. I don't know if you've played around with it much, but I'll be honest, man, Windows is trash. Windows is just bad. And SteamOS just feels good. And for what I'm doing a handheld with, I like the Steam Deck so much more. Even though technically it's less powerful than the others, it has a smaller screen than some of the others. But the fact that it just loads right into SteamOS and things I don't have to screw around with Windows. I don't have to go into, the ROG, whatever, the Ally thing and find updates for the firmware or for the drivers, this, that, and the other. It's just SteamOS just updates itself when there's a new update. And all I have to do sometimes is just say, you can go ahead and restart now. And, there was a time when I was precious and I was like, oh no, the reason to be a PC gamer is because you enjoy being able to really get underneath the hood and tinker around with stuff. And maybe it's because I'm older, maybe it's because I've played more console games now, but now I'm like, no. I want to turn the thing on and I want it to work. And I don't want to have to screw around with it. And so, again, it's not as powerful. The screen resolution isn't as high. It doesn't have variable refresh rate like the ROG Ally does, those sorts of things. But man, you ask me any of these handheld things, and I've tried a lot of them, folks. You ask me which one I'm going to spend the most time on, I can tell you, it's the Steam Deck. I love it. That thing's a freaking awesome little device.
Ain't nobody do it better. I've played around with that ROG Ally a little bit. It's fine. It's fun. Yeah. It's cool that it's a little Windows device, and I have a little portable keyboard I can attach to it and click, clack if I need to, because sometimes navigation's a pain in the ass because it's a Windows device and it's not designed to be navigated with a controller.
Exactly.
But what is designed to be navigated with a controller? The Steam Deck OS.
Yeah. I mean, it's a great device. So, well, there's my game bit. So what else have you been checking out lately?
Not a whole lot more than games. It's really been a lot of my attention. I can also say I got all caught up with all of my comics that are coming out in single issues this last week. I had, I want to say 2 months worth of comics to catch up on. Okay. And just, I'll give you some ups and downs of my recent comics reading. Down, Tom King can't write a comic book for his life. His Wonder Woman book sucks so bad I'm dropping it from my pull list.
Wow.
Which is disappointing, because here's the thing. This is an interesting thing. If you want to know a character that I can say most, if not the majority of the runs are good, and pretty much anyone they put on him does good work, that's Daredevil.
Sure.
Anyone they put on Daredevil seems to turn in pretty damn good work. For some people, it's the best work of their career, but for a lot of people, it's just like a really solid run on the book. Conversely, if I could name a single character where you put a really good writer on and they turn in some real dog shit, it's Wonder Woman. I don't know what it is about Wonder Woman, but a lot of writers who I respect a lot have tried and failed to write a good Wonder Woman book. And we were talking about it at the comic shop the other day, and I was like, if someone came to me and said, I want to read a good Superman book, I'm like, okay, what do you like about Superman? Because depending on how you answer that, I'll give you a few different answers, but I have a bunch of different answers. I have All-Star Superman, Superman Birthright, Superman for All Seasons, these are all like really, really solid books.
Sure.
You come to me and you say, I want to read a Batman book. I'd say, get better taste. Batman sucks. But if you really want to read a Batman book, Year One is right there for you. The Killing Joke, don't read it. It fucking sucks. Long Halloween, though, that's good. Dark Knight Returns is really influential, for better or largely for worse. Like, I could tell you these. But you come to me and you say, I want to read a Wonder Woman comic. And I'm like, well, fuck me. Like, I don't know. Like, probably the first 30 issues of the 87 Wonder Woman Volume 2 by George Perez. That's probably the answer. But like, that's not as satisfying as me saying, oh yes, you want to pick up the single book Superman Birthright, and that's all you'll need to read.
Sure.
It's different for me to be like, I don't know, like the first 2-3 years worth of George Perez's Wonder Woman from 1987. And like a lot of other people have done really bad runs on Wonder Woman. I thought G. Willow Wilson's run on Wonder Woman was pretty mid. I thought Greg Rucka, who I usually really like, did some pretty shit stuff on Wonder Woman. I think Brian Azzarello's New 52 run looks incredible because Cliff Chiang is drawing it, but it's dog shit in terms of the writing. I own it just because it was the absolute edition, so it's this enormous tabloid-sized book. I just want to look at Cliff Chiang's art. I don't want to read it because it's terrible. And so there was a new relaunch of Wonder Woman. It was early this year, late last year. I can't remember exactly when. Probably late last year because it's 12 issues in it. It comes out monthly. And Tom King was the writer they put on it. Are you familiar with Tom King at all as a comics writer, Peter?
The name sounds familiar, but I could not tell you why.
You might have heard of the superhero novel A Once Crowded Sky.
Maybe?
Here's the thing. I think he fucking sucks. I think Tom King is a bad writer. He's like some asshole who was in the CIA and then decided he wanted to write comics instead.
Uh-huh.
And so he's like a fucking spook and a fed, and like, fuck that guy. I'm being a little profane here, everyone, but now y'all know how I really feel about Tom King. But he got really, really popular because he did a book called Vision, and it was like a 12-issue miniseries about the Vision. And people really liked it. I thought it sucked, but people really liked it. And then he topped over to DC and he did Mr. Miracle, which was a 8 or 12 issue series about Mr. Miracle and Big Barda. And I thought it sucked, but a lot of people seemed to really like it. And then they put him on Batman, and he was supposed to have they planned it out there like this is going to be a 100-issue run on Batman. And then like the worm started to turn a little bit, and they didn't let him actually finish his Batman run. He ended on issue 85. Because people were tired of him being on that book because it wasn't very good.
Interesting.
But they still keep employing him because he still sells okay. Like, he sells good at our shop, even though I don't think he's very good at all. The one thing, if someone was to say, I want to read a Tom King comic, I'd say don't. But if you really want to, just like I said about Batman, I would say you should read Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow. That is a pretty interesting premise, even if I think the execution is sloppy. Of Supergirl turning 21 and saying, well, I want to go on a bender. That's what you do when you turn 21, but
Sure.
I'm impervious to alcohol because I'm a super person. And so she goes to a planet where she is not influenced by the sun in that way, so she can get drunk and shenanigans ensue. It's a pretty okay book. It looks incredible because Elsa Charretier is doing the art, and she is an incredibly talented artist. But man, it's as good as he gets, and it's kind of mid still.
Gotcha.
But they put him on Wonder Woman with Daniel Sampere, whose art I tend to really like, and I was like, we'll give it a try. We'll see where it goes. Man, it's been dog shit. It's really, really bad. So I'm dropping the book.
Oh, that's too bad.
So that's the thing I'll mention. There are some other books that have come out that I am sad are ending. She-Hulk ended at issue 10. Rainbow Rowell has been writing it, and she's been doing an incredible job. I really like She-Hulk. For those of you who know, she's my favorite superhero. And it's been probably the best run She-Hulk's ever had. So I'm sad to see it ending, but it is what it is.
Well, I'm going to do one real quick thing first, and that is to say that I am still trying to finish that book, Duskwalker, that I think I mentioned a couple of weeks ago. It's this story in the Black Ballad kind of campaign setting. I'm going to finish it because it's short. I'm going to say, now look, I say this with all the love in my heart, understanding that I am a super amateur writer who has 2 books written, but that they're not revised to the point I would let anybody read them, and certainly not to the point where I would like try and ever consider getting anything published. So this person has at least this published book, but it kind of feels sort of amateur. There was a whole battle thing, and one of the characters is oh gosh, the cat people. I'm blanking on what they are called now in Dungeons and Dragons, but the number of times that the word lithe was used to describe how this cat warrior person moved, it just was one of those things that stuck out, and I was like, this feels like, anyway, I'm going to finish it again. It's fairly short. I probably only have in the ebook format, I only have 50 more pages to go. So I'll finish it, but I'm looking forward to moving on. But what I did want to talk about, I wanted to talk about some music, because there's been a lot of music in the last couple of weeks that have come out that I think is worth talking about. Now, first thing I'm going to say is there have been 2 albums from bands that I like that I have not had time to get into because they just came out Friday. One of those is the new album Hopium from King Crow. I like King Crow. King Crow is like progressive metal for the days where I'm feeling really sort of chill. They'll have some good crunchy moments in the guitar, but the vocals are very, very, very pleasant, very nice, very, I don't know. It's kind of more chill, but sometimes you like that. Amiensis released Reclamation Part 2. They're kind of a sort of American black metal band. Reclamation Part 1 was awesome. Reclamation Part 2 reviews say that it is better, but I have not had a chance to really get into it. The other one actually that I will mention that I added to my library almost out of curiosity, and that is Time 2 by the band Winter Sun. Winter Sun is an interesting band in that Winter Sun dropped Time 1 back in 2012. And everybody was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. It's this kind of progressive black death metal, orchestral, just kind of big over the top. And then they kept saying Time 2 was going to come out, and it never came out. And then all of a sudden now, 14 years later, hey, guess what? Time 2 came out. I haven't read any reviews. I don't know if it's any good. But I thought to myself, hey, it's easy enough to add that to my Apple Music library, so I'm going to check it out. But here are the 5 that
I have to ask.
Yes, please.
Was the album named Time 1 when it came out, or was it just called Time?
Nope, it was named Time 1, Roman numeral 1.
Okay. So everyone's like, when's number 2? It wasn't like, we need a sequel.
Correct. It was announced that it was supposed to be 2 parts when it came out 14 years or 12 years ago.
Okay, sure.
So, stuff that I have been checking out and been really enjoying. I'm going to start with the shortest, and that is the new EP, The Pyre, from the band A Swarm of the Sun. Now, I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, the Pyre EP is literally just 2 songs off their forthcoming album that should be out in the next month or 2. I love A Swarm of the Sun.
So more of a single than an EP.
Yes, except for the fact that one of the tracks is 18 minutes and the other track is 6.5 minutes. So it's still 25 minutes.
It's still a single.
But
still a single.
I love A Swarm of the Sun. They have 3 albums. They are fantastic. I found out about them with their previous release, The Woods. The Woods is just 3 songs. It's about 39 minutes. So each one of those songs roughly is around 13 minutes or so. It is some of the most melancholic music I have ever listened to. It's very kind of, especially on The Woods, because they're longer songs. They're very slow builds, very just atmosphere of, again, just kind of sadness and loss and despair. And I don't know why sometimes, hey, that stuff just really clicks. But the nice thing about it is it's not like outright, it doesn't hit you over the head with it. It isn't that lyrically they're beating you down. It isn't anything like that. It really is just the sounds, the sonic landscape they create is one of loss and sadness, and some of the songs even kind of despair. But they do it better than like anybody. It is so good. And so I am super excited. The Pyre, this EP is excellent. Again, it's just 2 songs, but they are both very good. Again, a real slow build on particularly the song, The Pyre. But I could not be more excited. It's one of those, again, even though it's only 3 albums, like the second they announced they had a new album coming, I pre-ordered the vinyl because this is one of the bands that I'm just like, they haven't done anything wrong yet, and it doesn't sound like they're going to. So very excited about The Pyre or the full album by Swarm of the Sun. But this EP has been great. Nile. Nile has a new album. The Underworld Awaits Us All. Look, it's Nile. If you like Nile, you're going to like this album. If you don't like Nile, don't waste your time. I like Nile. Nile, even though they're from, like, I think Georgia in the United States, all of their albums, they are Egyptian themed. They all deal with Egyptian themed lyrics and Egyptian mythology, and they are just brutal death metal. And one of my complaints with Nile is some of their previous albums, the production wasn't great. The last 2 albums, Vile Nilotic Rites, and now this one, The Underworld Awaits Us All, is the production is matching really the intensity of the music. And so I really dig them. This is a great one. It's not their best album, but I'd say it's probably one of their better albums. So if you like Nile, The Underworld Awaits Us All, you can't go wrong. This next one's a bit of a disappointment. So the new album Grief by Zeal and Ardor. Zeal and Ardor's 2022 album, self-titled, was one of my favorites of the year. It was the first Zeal and Ardor album where I felt like they really hit their stride. Everything came together on Stranger Fruit and the Devil Is Fine, which was their first album. It is sort of, and I think I've described them before, it's like, what if like Black American spiritual songs, but instead of the slaves praying to God to get them out of their slavery, the slaves are praying to Satan to destroy those who are oppressing them. So it is,
Sure.
they have these moments and these elements of kind of Black American spirituals, but melded with some really at times vicious black metal. And their previous album, like I say, their self-titled was where it all just clicked for me. And that album is great. Grief is really interesting in that it feels like it is a collection of good ideas that never turned into songs. So it's incredibly frustrating because I'll get to a track and I'm like, okay, I like where this is going, but you've got to do something with it. And then it's just that same idea and it never develops and it never feels like it turns into a coherent actual song. So I'm kind of like, I can't get through it. I'll make myself listen to 3, 4, maybe even 5 songs, but then it just runs out of steam because it doesn't feel like the thoughts are complete. It's just a collection of ideas that never fully developed. So that's disappointing. Next one, this is a good one. Flesh God Apocalypse and their newest album, Opera. If you know Flesh God Apocalypse, you're going to know what you're getting on Opera, except I would say it's even more Flesh God-y. If you don't know Flesh God Apocalypse, they're an Italian symphonic death metal band, and they embrace the theatricality of their music. They embrace the kind of shtick. You can tell they're having fun with what they do. Opera is a great symphonic death metal album. Like the first track, the opening track is really just kind of instruments and then this beautiful operatic soprano who is a full-time member of the band. And then it goes right into the first song and the guitars hit and you've got the guitars and the double bass and you've got these choirs singing over the top and you can hear the symphonic elements and then all of a sudden it just gets to, and then the death metal growls come in. And it's fun. It is bombastic. It is so over the top. I was playing it in the car. My wife, the classically trained musician, was just like smiling and grinning because she's like, this is ridiculous and it's so much fun. She's like, this is extra. It's everything in the kitchen sink, but Flesh God pulls it off with aplomb. It is a fun album and I have been enjoying it a lot. The final one I want to mention is a really exciting one for me. So in 2013, a band from Canada called Ancients, with 2 I's, don't know why, they released their first album, Heart of Oak. And the very first track on Heart of Oak instantly grabbed me. It was this this blend of, at times, like it honestly kind of started feeling like it almost feels like Mastodon, like latter era Mastodon, post Crack the Sky, somewhere in there. And then all of a sudden it makes this change, and it makes a very smooth change, but it kind of sounds like black metal. And then all of a sudden it makes this other change. And now it's like, I mean, even to the point where it's more like tremolo playing and blast beats with black metal. And then it goes into a little more chugging riffs and more death metal growls. And it was great. I really, really liked Heart of Oak. I played the heck out of it back in 2013 when it came out, and it's an album that I would find myself going back to often. They released Voice of the Void in 2016, and it didn't click with me as much. Still a good album, but I didn't find myself going back to it the way I did find myself going back to Heart of Oak. That was 2016. Nothing. Haven't heard anything from them.
Oh, wow.
Until this last Friday. Beyond the Reach of the Sun dropped, their first album since 2016, so it's been 8 years, and it is excellent. It is that same Ancients sound. It's got kind of that Mastodon-y, again, sort of swagger. Again, people who know Mastodon know exactly what I'm talking about. But it's kind of got that Mastodon swing and swagger to them at times. Then it's got these great just death metal breakdowns. But this one is a little bit more progressive. Songs are a little longer. They have a little more dynamics where they really will back down and kind of get into these more contemplative moments, which again sort of reminds me, and I don't want to lean on this comparison too much, but it does remind me of some of the latter era Mastodon stuff, like both Crack the Sky and Hushed and Grim, because I think both of those albums have more dynamics in them. And it's great. It is a really, really good album. I have been loving it. Like I say, think that era of Mastodon, think Ghost Reveries era Opeth, because you've got some synthesizers and kind of organ sound in there, which was, again, more prominent, I think, on Ghost Reveries than any of the other Opeth albums. It is awesome. Like, I am loving it. I have not been able to listen to it as much as I would like because it just came out. But it is really, really good to have Ancients back with such a banger of an album, and they really knocked it out of the park. And so it has been a really good 2 weeks in terms of music, with lots of good stuff, some that's a little disappointing. But this is, again, 2 other albums that have been highly reviewed by some of the sites I check from bands that I really like. I haven't even had time to get into those. So for me, it's been a really good couple weeks in music. But
nice.
We have gone quite long now, so let's kind of come to our brief little topic of the week. And the topic that I thought, and it really stemmed from our conversation at Comic-Con, where we were talking about, we saw Nathan Fillion, and then I happened to mention Castle, and that my wife and I really loved Castle until Castle, and I cannot remember Stana Katic's character name, I'm sorry, but until the two of them got together officially and they got married. And then that's where the show just went totally off the rails. And so I was thinking, what shows are shows where people in the show got together and it either made the show better or it made the show worse? So I've thrown out Castle. What's an example for you of a show where things got worse when a couple officially really got together?
Well, I mean, the classic one, which we also brought up when we were talking out in San Diego, is obviously Jim and Pam.
Yeah.
Because that really ruined that show for a lot of people, myself included. Here's the thing. The will they, won't they was interesting. Once they got together, they were terrible for each other, and to everyone else on the cast. And you're just like, I hate everything about this show now. But yeah, so I think that is definitely an example of where it really hurt the show.
So that's interesting. And I haven't seen The Office. So again, I don't know. But one of the things you just said, I think connected with me as I look at my brief little list of these where it either did work or didn't work. And you specifically said they were bad for each other and bad to the other people around them. And as I look at my list, I go, that actually I think is one of the keys. Like, that's one of the keys in which ones of these work and which ones of these don't.
Mm-hmm.
So
what are some other ones that you can think of that they definitely don't work?
Oh, well, look, keep say whatever you want about the TV show Friends. It ran forever. But every time Ross and Rachel get together in Friends, that show is much the worse for it. It is a worse
Oh,
show
yeah.
every time Ross and Rachel get together. And it's one of the most annoying parts about that entire show.
Yeah. That was one I was talking with my wife as we were eating dinner about how we were going to be talking about this. And she brought up that one as a definite example of just like, yeah, no, it's just bad. Whenever those two are together, it's bad.
But interestingly, I think once when Chandler and Monica actually get together, I actually think their relationship becomes better and more interesting. And I think that makes their relationship is one of those where it makes the show a little bit stronger.
I would agree with that too. And I really think it comes down to like Ross and Rachel is the bedrock of the show from the first ep.
Yes.
Like Ross is pining for Rachel, even though he's in a marriage that's falling apart because his wife just came out as a lesbian. Like that is from the first episode. He's like, well, I was in this relationship, but my real love was, Rachel. But like Chandler and Monica, they came to it naturally after a few years, and they were like, let's put these characters together and see how it goes. And it goes well.
Yeah.
And I think that makes all the difference there of like, it wasn't like, and again, that's part of what makes the Jim and Pam stuff so tortured is because that is the background of the show is Jim is in love with Pam, but Pam is engaged to Roy. And like, so when that starts to resolve, it's ugly. Whereas like things that happen a little more naturally are a little more interesting.
Yeah. So on the flip side, one that I don't think made it any worse, and I don't know, maybe you'll disagree. Maybe it's just because I really enjoy the show, but I've been watching it again. And I think in Brooklyn Nine-Nine, when Jake and Amy do get together, I think they have a really good relationship, and I really like what they do with that in the show. And I don't think that it makes it worse in any way. And I think in some ways it makes it better because, Jake is a funny character because, from the very beginning we have that he's a very good detective, but he is a mess of a human being. He is juvenile.
He's a man-child.
He's a very good detective who's a man-child. And I think it's really good to see the way he develops and becomes less of a man-child because of Amy's influence. And it makes him a more full character, a more thought-out character, he feels more real because you can see him growing. And you can see, I think, both of them growing through that. And I think that's one of the things that makes it strong.
Well, and I think that's true the other way around too, because like at the start of that show, Amy is uptight and persnickety and anal retentive, and this is the thing that's interesting about that show is they get together and they sort of orbit each other for a while, just like in many of these other shows. But like once they get together, fundamentally, they grow and they improve as people while still staying true to the core of who they are. Because like by the end of that show, Jake Peralta is still a goofy guy, but he is also a responsible parent.
Exactly.
And Amy Santiago is still like goal-oriented and focused and driven and like very type A, but she's also learned to loosen up and to like be a normal human and treat people like they're people rather than like these like personas upon which to latch and learn things from. And that's why that relationship works in the course of that show is because they are good together and good for each other and good for the rest of the people around them.
Exactly. And like I said, when you said that earlier about Jim and Pam, it was immediately where I thought of this, and I thought Jake and Amy being together is better for the precinct. It's better for the people around them. It's better, and they're better for each other. And I think that's the key, because another one that I was thinking of is when Parks and Rec, when Leslie and Ben get together. I think that I think that makes the show stronger, and I think that that's a really good relationship because of, again, the way they both grow with each other and how that impacts both of them as well as the people around them.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with you. I think that's extremely true. And we were talking about like other shows that are not comedies, ones where like the couple getting together really ruined things, and a couple other ones that really came to mind. Did you ever watch the show The Medium?
No.
Patrick Jane?
I remember seeing it, but I did
I
never
hadn't
see it.
either. I hadn't either, but like I've heard multiple people whose opinions I trust say this is a really good show. So I suggested it to Cassie at one point, and she was like in the mood for a crime show instead of a comedy, as
Sure.
she's like watching shows. So she's like, yeah, I'll give it a try. And so she watched it and ended up liking it pretty well. Like she said it was a pretty good show. But it does that same sort of thing where for the first like 6 seasons, like the two main characters are always like, people are like, oh, you two are together, right? Oh, you two are together. And they're like, no, we're not. Like, yuck. We don't have that type of relationship. And then clearly it was a case of like, it feels like, well, that show really had a thing in season 6 where they were like, we need to tie up all the loose ends, get a new status quo. And part of that tying up loose ends, get a new status quo was they can't be like, no, we'd never date. It now needs to be, no, they're like married.
Oh,
And it's like, what? It came out of left field and like kind of ruined the show, Cassie said. And like just seemed out of character for both of them
sure.
and doesn't really work. Another one she mentioned is Bones. Did you ever watch Bones?
No, but I'm familiar with it. And it was actually one of those that in the back of my head, I was like, for some reason, I feel like this is on those lists often.
Yeah, it's another one of those ones that like really falls off once those two main characters get together. And you know, we tried to think of ones where it works. And there's just not as many. Like we thought about New Girl, where like once Jess and Nick get together, it doesn't really work as well anymore. It's still okay. It's still better than some of those ones that really fall off, but like it doesn't work as well.
Well, and I think I think you really hit on the reason, because the key, it seems to me, in making this work is the ability of the writers, and honestly, I think the actors, but it's their ability to take this relationship and not just make it, again, sure, you can have the tension, you can have the chemistry of the will they, won't they, that sort of thing. But once you decide that, yeah, they will, you've got to be able to make it something where through that relationship, we see changes in the people. We see changes in those characters. And those are the times where I feel like it works. Again, thinking back to Castle, they get together, and then to like amp up the tension, instead of having Castle become a better person, less of an egomaniac. And again, you know, I feel bad that I can't remember her name, but it's been a long friggin' time since I watched that show. But, you know, instead of having them grow and how do we take this relationship and apply it to this working situation that we've been in, what do they decide to do? Well, all of a sudden they get Castle like wakes up on a boat and doesn't know what's happened. And like they just make it ridiculous because they didn't have a good character arc. So they had to throw in other ridiculous bullshit to try and say, oh no, but this is still interesting. And so, you know, here's the thing. I think most people enjoy watching, reading. Again, we've talked about it in games. Characters grow and develop over time because we all go through that to some degree. Hopefully we go through it to a pretty good degree. Though I think we all know people whose growth got stunted at some early age. Some of them, unfortunately, have lots and lots of money. But anyway, I digress. It's that human experience. I mean, that's the thing, is I see it and we identify with it because it is part of being human, is growing and developing and changing in response to what happens to you, but also who you're with. And the times where they can't pull that off, when all the shows had was the tension, then it doesn't work. Because now, how else do you create that tension? How else do you suck people in and get them interested and invested? Because you didn't do enough work of who are these people and how do they develop as they're interacting with each other and moving toward this outcome of, yeah, they're going to now be together and they're going to be a couple. And so, yeah, it is, I think, a little bit more work, but, and so maybe that's why it doesn't happen as often, why it doesn't work as often as it doesn't work. I don't know. Those are just kind of my thoughts.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think you've hit it on the head there. Like, if you want the couple's relationship to work, it needs to have growth and evolution and change or you need to break them back up. Like, an example where that happens, Cassie right now is in the middle of a rewatch of the Mindy Project, which, from the start of that show, Mindy Kaling's character is in love with Danny Castellanos and she really wants to get with him. And eventually the two do get together and it goes pretty poorly. And so they break up pretty shortly. And that is the right move. Because then they're able to tell stories still and it doesn't all fall apart.
Yeah.
So people need to be not scared to make that choice,
True. Very true. Well, anything else you want to mention before we wrap it up today, Eden?
I don't think so. We should probably wrap it up. My wife has been outside by the fire and she just texted me and said it's starting to get chilly. And I was like, well, I think we're wrapping up, so you should be able to come in shortly.
Well, you need to let her come in or go outside and be at the fire with her or whatever you want to do. So we'll wrap it up and we'll be back in another couple of weeks. And we're going to watch this movie, this 2 hour and 47 minute 1972 or 74. Anyway, we're going to watch this.
1972's Andrei Tarkovsky's Solaris.
So that's what's coming in 2 weeks. But until then,
it's the anti 2001 A Space Odyssey.
There we go.
Because this is the movie he made when he watched 2001 A Space Odyssey and he was like, I don't like that.
All right. Well, I'm looking forward to watching.
So,
again, it was just one of these timing wise. It wasn't this time, but it will be next time.
Indeed.
Until then, please, subscribe, share, leave a rating, leave a star rating, leave a review. And if you've got anything you want to share with us, feedback@themiddleofculture.com. And we'll be back in another couple of weeks. Until then, bye.
Talk to you later.
So listen, y'all, here's the thing. I'm never going to be that good. I look at all of the meta and but if you want a time where you can just run around a pretty good looking world, and by good, I mean grim, but I like the way it looks, and just slaughter the shit out of, I'm having a great time with Diablo IV. I don't have to get too deep into the meta for that. And I can just go ahead and run around and murder everything I see. And it's pretty good. Some days that's all you got to do. You just got to go and you got to murder stuff. So, also, if you don't like the music talk, I apologize. Get ready for some music talk. But it's been a pretty good couple weeks for music. And so I'm going to have to talk about, I'll try and make it relatively quick. But hey, if you didn't know that I like music, clearly you haven't been listening to this podcast. And if this is your first one, guess what? I like music and we're glad you're here with us. And I'm going to talk about music.